In my non-spoiler review, I talked about surviving a relationship so obsessive it nearly broke me. But what obsession does so brilliantly, and what we can finally talk about today, is reveal that the real monster isn't the crazy girlfriend. It's the pathetic nice guy who stripped away her agency and forced her to be that way. What if a person you wanted the most finally loved you back, but not because they chose to? That is the nightmare behind Obsession, a horror movie about a lonely romantic, a wish, and the ugly truth hiding underneath fantasy love. The non-spoiler review is already up on YouTube, but this is the version where I can finally talk about what Obsession is really doing. Because once you get past the hook of be careful what you wish for, this movie gets a lot meaner, stranger, and more disturbing. Welcome back to A Constantly Racing Mind, where we break down sci-fi, horror, action, adventure, pop culture, and all things geek, with a focus on why these stories work, or don't, because every frame tells a story. I'm Rob, and today we are going into full spoiler territory with Obsession. That means I'm talking about Bear's Wish, Nikki's loss of control, the real horror behind the One Wish Willow, and the ending that turns the whole thing into one last nasty joke. So this is your warning. If you still want to see Obsession clean, stop here. If you're ready to talk about everything, let's dive in. Okay, are we ready to jump into the spoilers of Curry Barker's twisted masterpiece and talk about why Bear is actually the true villain of this story? The protagonist is Baron, or Bear, played by Michael Johnston, a shy, hopeless romantic employee at a music store. He's been in love with his childhood friend and co-worker Nikki, played by Inde Navarrette, for years, but lacks the courage to confess his true feelings. Obsession opens with a fake commercial for the One Wish Willow, which is already a smart move. It immediately tells us that this thing is cheap, weird, and probably dangerous. It looks like the kind of novelty junk you would find in a strange little gift shop. But the movie is already planting the idea that this object is important. This little gimmick reminded me of when, as a kid, I would sometimes stop at a small corner novelty store on my way home from school. It was run by an older couple, and the shop had gag gifts, magic tricks, and stuff just like the One Wish Willow. I found out after a while that the older couple were actually my great uncle and great aunt on my dad's father's elusive side. Then we cut to a diner, and the film starts playing with us. Bear is sitting across from a young woman pouring his heart out. He's being emotional, vulnerable, and painfully sincere. He talks in these cheesy romantic lines that sound like they came from a bad love song. At first it looks like this is the big confession. This is the moment where Bear finally tells Nikki how he feels. But then his best friend, Ian, interrupts and says, no, that's not going to work. And that is when the movie reveals the joke. Bear is not confessing to Nikki at all. He is practicing his speech on their server. Even funnier, the server is totally into it. She's happy to be part of the practice run. This is a strong comedic opening because it immediately tells us who Bear is. He's awkward, he's emotional, he wants love so badly that he has turned asking someone out into a rehearsal. He cannot just say what he feels. He needs coaching, staging, and a safe version of the moment before he can face the real one. But the scene gets darker once you know the truth about Ian. Ian is helping Bear practice winning Nikki over while he is secretly sleeping with Nikki himself. So what starts as a funny best friend coaching scene becomes something much more uncomfortable. Ian knows Bear is walking into heartbreak. He knows Nikki does not want Bear that way. And he still lets Bear build himself up for the fall. Even with giving the bad advice to call Nikki Freaky Nikki, as she was sometimes known in high school. Bear knows she hates the name, but Ian insists, says it will be cute, or something like that. Call her Freaky Nikki. The opening also gives Bear another emotional wound. His cat has just died after getting into prescription pills. So before Bear ever finds the One Wish Willow, he is already in a bad place. He is grieving, lonely, embarrassed, and desperate for something to go right. That is why the wish works so well as a setup. Bear does not find it when he's thinking clearly. He finds it when he is vulnerable, rejected, and looking for comfort. The movie opens funny, but the joke has teeth. It's not just showing us an awkward guy with a crush. It's showing us a lonely person surrounded by people who already know the truth before he does. And once Bear gets the One Wish Willow, that loneliness turns into something much worse. After the diner scene and the death of Bear's cat, the movie keeps stacking little emotional pressures on him. Bear is on the phone with Nikki, and she mentions that she lost her crystal necklace. It is not some giant, dramatic moment, but Bear sees an opening. He wants to do something nice for her. He wants to be useful. He wants to be noticed. That leads him to the crystal shop, and this is where he finds the aforementioned One Wish Willow. And I love how cheap and strange this thing feels. It does not feel like some ancient relic with glowing symbols and thunder in the background. It feels like something you would buy as a joke. That makes it creepier. The movie treats it like a piece of novelty junk, but we already know it's going to ruin everyone's life. Of course, like a genie, the trinket promises to grant its owner one wish. That's all the info we get. But that is what makes it work. Curry Barker does not stop to explain every rule or give us a giant mythology dump. It just gives Bear the object, gives him the wish, and then lets the consequences destroy everything. Immediately, stories like Big, the Monkey Paw, and Wishmaster come to mind. Then the friend group goes out for trivia and drinks. Bear is there with Nikki, Ian, and Sarah, and the whole time you can feel him waiting for the right moment. He wants to confess. He knows he needs to say something. And every time he gets close, someone distracts him. Cockblocker Ian, who actually doesn't want Bear to ask Nikki out for drinks, or Sarah, who is genuinely affectionate toward Bear. And after the bar, he finally gets the chance when he gives Nikki a ride home. I like the trivia scene, as that is what me and my wife do every week. Meet friends, socialize, and have a good time. This is the moment Bear has been rehearsing for, and he completely blows it. She even asked him outright if he liked her. Now I get this part. This is not easy. He gets nervous. He starts using awkward setup lines. He hides behind bad jokes. He says things that make the moment more uncomfortable instead of more honest. You can feel him trying to steer himself toward the confession, but he cannot get there. He just keeps swerving away from it. So instead of telling Nikki the truth, he drops her off and says nothing. I see this as a key to Bear in these early scenes. He wants love, but he cannot handle rejection. He wants the reward without the risk. He wants the fantasy without the part where Nikki gets to answer. It takes courage to ask a girl out. Then alone in the car, frustrated and embarrassed, he pulls out the One Wish Willow. And this is where the movie crosses the line. Bear snaps his stick and wishes that Nikki would love him more than anyone else in the world. Not that he would have the courage to ask her out, not that she would see him differently, not that he could move on. He wishes for Nikki to love him more than anyone else, more than anything else. Bear's wish appears to come true. The wish works immediately. Nikki comes back outside and invites him in. At first, this plays like Bear got the miracle he wanted. The night is saved. The girl came back. The fantasy is happening. But that is the trap. That is not a romantic victory. This is the moment the horror begins, because Bear did not win Nikki's heart. He overrode it. Right after the wish takes effect, obsession does something sneaky. It turns into a fake romantic comedy. Nikki suddenly becomes obsessed with him, professing her love in an eerie, intense manner. She tells him that she loves him so much. A love only a branch of a willow tree could conjure. Conjure, the key word there. Imagine what is going through Bear's mind from being completely friend-zoned to being pursued aggressively. And for a short time, Bear gets exactly what he thought he wanted. Nikki's into him. They are dating. Everything feels light, playful, and almost too perfect. The movie gives us this happy-go-lucky montage, like we are watching a weird little love story finally work out. She is all in. Bear finally has the relationship he imagined. But even inside that montage, something is off. There is a moment where Bear and Nikki are watching a movie, and she will not stop staring at him. Not in a cute way, not in a romantic way. She is locked on him. Bear actually has to turn her head back toward the screen because she will not look away. We realize that she is not in love with Bear. She is fixated on him, which Barker takes that awkward feeling and pushes it straight into horror. This is all very weird, but Bear indulges in the fantasy of coming true. This was almost like honeymoon-like phase. However, Nikki's behavior quickly shifts from romantic to erratic and possessive. She begins by telling elaborate lies about her dad having cancer, and she needs Bear. But her dad was a man she did not like. Anyway, to me, that lies are part of the pattern of behavior that signals to Bear and us that this isn't the real Nikki. She also displays disturbing mood swings and demands. that Bear reciprocate her intensity at every moment. Bear and Nikki spend the night at his inherited grandmother's house. There is a sex scene between Bear and Nikki that is important because it changes how we look at Bear. Up to that point, you could still read Bear as lonely, awkward, and desperate. Not innocent, but maybe pathetic enough that you understand how he got there. He wants Nikki to love him. He makes the wish, and at first, he acts as if he has stumbled into a fantasy he does not fully understand. But this scene takes away some of that excuse. Bear knows Nikki is not herself. He has seen enough to know that her behavior is wrong. While doing the deed, the camera zooms into Nikki's face and you can see that she is clearly checked out. She isn't there. Her body, yeah, but her mind, like an SA victim, is doing what she can to get through the act. Watching the scene gives you a sickening feeling that makes you wonder, did they really go there? Because this is not a normal attraction. This is not a real emotional shift. This is something forced onto her. The wish has changed her, and Bear can feel that, and he still goes along with it. That is what makes the scene disturbing. It's not just about physical intimacy. It's about consent, control, and self-deception. Bear tells himself he has finally gotten what he wanted, but deep down he knows this is not love. Nikki is not choosing him in a real way. She is trapped inside his wish. So when Bear gives in to the moment, the movie makes a clear point he is not just a victim of the curse. He also benefits from it. This is why Bear is such an uncomfortable lead. He is not evil in a clean, simple way. He is worse than that. He is weak, lonely, selfish, and willing to ignore the truth when the lie gives him what he wants. And that makes the horror hit harder, because the monster is not only the One Wish Willow, but also Bear's willingness to accept love when he knows it's not freely given. Around 3 a.m, Bear wakes up to take a piss and realizes Nikki is gone from the bed. I found that is never a good thing in a horror movie. But the movie keeps letting little cracks show. Nikki stares too long. She moves wrong. She stands in the dark like something pretending to be a person. It starts as awkward, then it becomes creepy. Then it becomes full-on nightmare fuel. Curry Barker took the first 20 or so minutes to establish the story and the characters. In some way, it felt like the pacing dragged a little bit, but once things got moving, this shit gets insane and stays that way for the rest of the film. Because this is when the honeymoon phase is over. The movie has already shown us that Nikki is too attached, too intense, and too locked in. But this is where it becomes clear that something is seriously wrong with her. Or more accurately, something is wrong with what Bear did to her. And then comes the cat. I honestly thought that Lee Cronin had pushed the limits to gore and horror for the year in The Mummy. But no, this is one of the first truly grotesque moments in Obsession. Nikki digs up the body of Bear's recently dead cat and turns it into some kind of morbid memorial shrine on the kitchen floor. And the worst part is that she thinks that she is doing something loving. That is what makes it so disturbing. Nikki is not acting out of normal grief or kindness. She is acting out of this warped devotion that the wish forced onto her. She wants to comfort Bear, but the way she does it is horrifying. So the movie starts with romance, then lets the cracks show. The staring, the smiling in the dark, the dead cat shrine. By this point, Bear should understand that this is not love. This is not a dream come true. This is the wish showing him exactly what he asked for with all the humanity stripped out of it. The next act is where Bear tries to go back to normal life, and the movie makes it clear that normal is gone. He wakes up and tries to leave for work at the music store, but Nikki has sealed the front door shut with duct tape. Not a little tape, 4 rolls of duct tape. She has basically trapped him inside the house because she does not want him to leave her. And this is where the movie keeps doing the thing that where it makes something almost funny, then immediately makes it awful. Because the idea of someone taping a door shut is ridiculous. But the reason she did it is terrifying. Barry eventually gets out and goes to work. Nikki has packed him a lunch, and for a second it feels like maybe the movie is giving us another strange romantic gesture. Then the sandwich happens. The movie crosses into this disgusting pitch-black comedy. It is gross, but it's also kind of funny in the worst possible way. That is a hard balance to pull off, and Obsession keeps doing it. Then Starr starts looking through the sticky notes Nikki left him in the lunchbox. One of the notes says, "What's the verdict? Cat." And that is where Bear realizes what he has been eating. Nikki dug up his dead cat, made made a shrine, then made it into a sandwich, and packed it for him like it was an act of love. That is one of the nastiest turns in the movie. It's not just gross for the sake of being gross, it is personal. It takes Bear's grief, twists it into devotion, and feeds it back to him, literally. Bear throws up into a wastebasket, and honestly, that is the correct reaction. My gag reflex almost went off on its own. After that, Inde confronts him, and this is where the friend group starts pushing back. Inde tells Bear that everyone is uncomfortable with what is happening between him and Nikki. The relationship has gone too far. It is too intense. It is too weird. Everyone can see it except Bear, or at least Bear keeps trying not to fully admit it. Inde tells him that there is a party that night. Bear can come, but Nikki cannot. And that creates the next problem. Before facing Nikki, Bear calls the customer support number on the One Wish Willow box, which is such a great dark comedy idea. He's not calling because he fully understands what he did. He's still trying to figure out if there's a way to change it, tweak it, or undo part of it. Basically, he wants a supernatural refund policy, and the person on the other end is way too cool. Bear finally asks the real question. Are Nikki's feelings real, or did he just rewrite her entire life without her consent? And the answer is brutal. Yeah, as long as you live. That line changes everything. Now Bear knows that this is not a misunderstanding. Nikki is not choosing him. Her feelings are not real the way love is supposed to be. The wish has hijacked her, and unless Bear dies, Nikki stays trapped like this forever. The thing is, the service rep asks Bear if he wants to speak to Nikki, which is odd, as she should be at home. The rep puts her on, and all we hear is screaming. Tortured, tortured, screaming. It's funny because it plays like a customer service call, but it is horrifying because Bear is basically being told, yes, you did this, and yes, she is stuck. When Bear gets home after a full shift, Nikki is exactly where he left her. She has not moved all day. She's been standing in the living room waiting for him to come back. And the movie makes that image disgusting. She's been there so long that she wet herself, shit herself, and thrown up on herself. This scene is horrifying because it shows how broken the wish really is. Nikki is no longer functioning as a person. Her entire existence has been reduced to waiting for Bear. So when Bear tries to explain the party as a boys' night, Nikki loses it, and Bear does what Bear keeps doing. He caves. Instead of drawing a hard line, instead of facing what he has done, he brings her along. And that sets up the Jenga scene, where the social awkwardness finally starts turning into public chaos. The party scene is where the movie stops letting Bear hide from what is happening. Ian already told him not to bring Nikki. That was the one rule. Bear was invited, Nikki was not. And honestly, Ian is not wrong. By that point, everyone can see that something is wrong with her and something is wrong with this relationship. But at home, when Bear tries to tell Nikki he is going without her, she completely melts down. So Bear caves again. This is one of Bear's biggest problems in the movie. He keeps choosing the easiest short-term escape instead of the hard truth. He knows bringing Nikki is a bad idea. He knows the group is uncomfortable. He knows this is going to go badly. But he does it anyway because he cannot handle the immediate pressure. So they show up at Inde's house and the group starts playing Jenga with prompts written on the blocks. We don't know what Nikki's Jenga block prompt was, but Nikki gives this long, disturbing, incestuous version of Hansel and Gretel that goes way beyond normal party awkwardness. It's twisted, uncomfortable, and far too intense for the room. Everyone is just sitting there trying to figure out how to react. This is also where Inde Navarrette really makes Nikki feel unpredictable. She shifts her voice, plays with strange accents, and makes the whole story feel like something that should not be coming out of a person at a casual party. It's funny for a second, then it becomes deeply uncomfortable. Then the game pushes everything over the edge. Bear pulls a Jenga block that tells him to kiss the person to his left, and the person to his left is Sarah. Nikki snaps. She stands up, pulls Sarah away, gets her kiss, and then she breaks a bottle and turns the violence on herself. She stabs herself in the face. That moment is horrifying because it's not just jealousy. It is the curse reacting to a threat. Sarah's not even trying to take Bear away. She is just sitting in the wrong seat when the wrong prompt gets pulled. And then the scene gets even more important. For a brief second, the version of Nikki created by the wish starts to crack. Through all the chaos, the real Nikki breaks through and cries out, "That's not me." That line changes everything. Because now the horror is not just Nikki is acting strange. The horror is that Nikki is still there. She knows what is happening. She is watching her own body do things she does not want to do. That is the first real proof that Bear did not create love. He trapped Nikki inside a nightmare wearing her face. After the Jenga party, things get even darker. Nikki threatens to kill herself if Bear leaves her, so Bear stays in bed with her. And by this point, he knows this is not normal. He knows this is not love. But he keeps trying to survive each moment instead of facing what he actually did. It's 2:45 in the morning when Sarah texts him. She needs to see him at the park. She has something important to tell him. Bear tries to sneak out while Nikki is lying right next to him, just staring. But as he is almost out the door, something changes. The version of Nikki created by the Wish falls asleep, and the real Nikki breaks through, and she tells Bear, "Don't wake her up." That line alone is horrifying because now we understand the split. There is the Nikki Bear wished into existence, and there is the real Nikki trapped underneath it. Then she begs him to kill her. Not because she hates Bear in some simple way, not because she is being dramatic. She wants out. She knows she is trapped inside her own body, and she would rather die than stay locked inside this version of herself. And Bear's reaction says everything about him. Instead of hearing her pain, he gets offended. He basically turns it back on himself, like, is being with me really that bad? This is such an ugly Bear moment. The real Nikki is begging for release, and he still makes it about his feelings. He still wants to be the wounded romantic. He still wants sympathy, even after his wish destroyed her choice. Then he leaves anyway and goes to meet Sarah. At the park, Sarah drops the bombshell. Inde and Nikki were secretly sleeping together before Bear made the wish. That hurts Bear, but it also explains so much about the early part of the movie. Inde knew Bear was setting himself up for heartbreak, and Inde was still coaching him through it like some helpful best friend. But Sarah is not just there to hurt him with the truth. She also has some good news. She got her first final acceptance letter to college, and she wanted Bear there with her when she opened it. That detail makes what happens next feel even meaner. Sarah has a life outside of this mess, and before she and Bear can even open the letter, Nikki arrives. This is the point of absolute no return. Nikki smashes through the car window with a brick to get to Sarah, and the movie turns brutal fast. She attacks Sarah with this jealous, animalistic intensity, then repeatedly smashes her face against the steering wheel with the brick right there on the steering wheel. It's not a clean horror kill. It's not a quick, it's not stylish in a fun way. It's ugly. It's extremely personal. It feels like Nikki is trying to erase Sarah completely. And what makes it worse is that Sarah does not just disappear from the movie in one quick shock. The scene lets the aftermath sit there. Sarah is left gasping, broken, and helpless. Bloody face, everything popping in eyes. It's disgusting. Freaking heartbreaking. This is when obsession fully crosses over. Before this, the movie had been disturbing, funny, gross, and uncomfortable. But this is the moment where the wish creates a body count, and Sarah is the first to pay for Bear's fantasy. After Sarah's murder, obsession stops pretending there is any way this can go back to normal. Nikki says they need to take care of the body, which I was thinking the movie is about to move into cleanup mode. But instead, the situation gets even more bizarre and nightmarish. Nikki just leaves Sarah's body for Bear to deal with. That is the part where Barker, Navarrette, and Johnston make this session feel so unhinged. The movie is no longer functioning as a typical crime story. It feels like Bear is trapped inside the consequences of the wish, and the world around him is getting uglier and less rational by the minute. So Bear goes back to the crystal shop. At this point, he is desperate. He knows Nikki is trapped. He knows Sarah is dead. He knows the wish is not just ruining his life, it is destroying everyone around him. The One Wish Willow cannot be undone. The wish cannot be canceled. The only way to break it is for the person who made the wish to die. That means Bear has to die, and of course, Bear does not want to accept that. So instead of making the hard choice, he looks for another loophole. He buys a second wish stick and runs to Inde's house. His plan is simple: get Inde to make a new wish that cancels out the original one. But Inde, being the friend that he is, still does not fully believe him. Even after everything, Inde treats the whole thing as if Bear is losing his mind. So when Bear begs him to make the right wish, Inde wastes it. He wished for $1 billion, and the movie actually gives it to him. $1 billion falls from the sky, which is such a dark, ridiculous moment. It's funny, but it's also frustrating because Inde had the chance to help fix everything, and he used it on himself. But the money does not save Inde. Inde goes to Bear's house, and the possessed version of Nikki just him too. So now Bear has lost Sarah. He has lost Inde. Nikki is still trapped, and the wish is still active. That is when Bear finally runs out of tricks. No more second wish, no more crystal shop, no more friend group, no more pretending that this can be fixed without a cost. The movie has backed Bear into the one truth he kept avoiding. If he really wants to free Nikki, he has to delete himself. And that sets up the ending where Bear has to decide whether he actually loves Nikki enough to give up his own life, or whether this was always about him wanting to be loved more than he cared about her being free. The ending of Obsession is bleak, chaotic, and honestly pretty cruel. By this point, Bear has no more loopholes. The Crystal Shop already told him the rule. The wish cannot be taken back. The only way to free Nikki is for Bear to delete himself. So Bear finally makes the choice he has been avoiding. He takes the sleeping pills. You know the ones his cat ate. And for a moment, it looks like he is actually doing the right thing. Too late, obviously. Sarah is dead, Inde is dead, Nikki's life is destroyed. But in the one moment, Bear accepts that he is the source of the curse, and the only way to stop it is to remove himself from the equation. But Obsession does not let him go out clean. As Bear is dying, the possessed, glitchy version of Nikki grabs another One Wish Willow and snaps it. Her final wish is that Bear will love her as much as she loves him. And this is where the movie gets really nasty. For the last minute of Bear's life, his mind is rewritten too. Suddenly, he and Nikki are on the same frequency. They are both trapped in this artificial love. They look at each other with the same empty, obsessive devotion, like two people who have been hollowed out and turned into a romantic nightmare. It is the darkest version of now they love each other equally. Not real love, not earned love, not chosen love. Just two people reduced to a spell. Then Nikki, still under the curse, decides she cannot live without him. But before she can follow him into death, Bear dies. His heart stops. Because Bear was the original wishmaker, the first curse finally breaks. That is when the real Nikki comes back. And this is the cruelest part of the ending. Nikki is free, but freedom comes too late. She wakes up in the wreckage of everything Bear caused. Bear is dead in her arms. Sarah and Inde are dead. Her life is destroyed, and the movie makes it clear that she remembers everything. She was not gone, she was trapped. She remembers what her body did. She remembers the murders. She remembers the feeling of being forced to love Bear. She remembers being a prisoner in her mind while the witch, or whatever it was, used her body like a weapon. This is what makes the ending so brutal. Bear finally dies, and yes, that breaks the spell, but it does not fix anything. It does not bring Sarah back. It does not bring Inde back. It does not give Nikki her life back. It just leaves her alone with the damage. So the final twist is not that love wins. It is that Nikki survives, and survival in this movie might be the worst punishment of all, I think. What makes Obsession interesting from a filmmaking angle is that Curry Barker is not just directing the movie. He is writing it, directing it, and editing it. That matters because the movie feels designed from the inside out. Barker comes from very low-budget filmmaking. In an interview with But Why Though, he said he was used to making short films for almost no money, and that it shaped the way he wrote Obsession. He did not write the movie like someone hoping a big crew would solve every problem later. He wrote it around limits, fewer wasted angles, fewer loose pieces, more control over what the camera sees, when the cut happens, and how the tension builds. That also shows up in his directing style. Barker and cinematographer Taylor Clemons planned the movie heavily before filming. Barker said they digitally shot the movie ahead of time using 3D scanning and a kind of virtual layout, so they knew the shots before they arrived on set. For a whole horror film like that matters. It means the fear is not only coming from the premise, it is coming from placement, timing, and control. I also want to point out that Clemons' cinematography is deliberately unsettling. Center composed shots with extra headspace to make sure you feel loneliness and discomfort of the protagonist. As a writer, Barker is working with a simple horror idea. What if a wish actually works? But the result is morally rotten. Bear wants Nikki to love him. That sounds like a dark fairy tale or a monkey's paw setup. But the movie pushes it into something more uncomfortable. Barker has said the premise naturally becomes a story about consent, because forcing someone to love you means taking control away from them. That is why Bear is not written as a clean hero. He is awkward, he is lonely. At times he can even seem sympathetic. But Barker said he needed an actor who could play both innocence and something sinister underneath it. That is the line the film walks. It is not just asking, will Bear get the girl? It is asking what kind of person would accept love if they knew it had been forced. The editing is another big part of this. Barker edits his own work, and he said he is already editing while writing the scene. That means he knows what he wants to cut before he even gets to set. That can make a horror movie feel tighter because the movie is not searching for its rhythm later. The rhythm is built into the writing. The camera, the performance, and the edit are all working toward the same movement. There is also a comedy brain underneath the horror. Barker has a background in digital comedy, and he has talked about horror and comedy using similar muscles. Both depend on timing. Both depend on surprise. Both can make an audience react before they have time to protect themselves. That helps explain why Obsession can be funny and uncomfortable at the same time. The joke does not cancel out the horror. Sometimes it makes the horror worse, because the laugh comes from recognizing how wrong the moment is. For the music, Rock Burwell is the composer, but Barker's own relationship with film music is important to the movie's shape. He told Dread Central that music is everything to him and that he listened to atmospheric tonal score pieces while writing Obsession. So even before the final score, the film was being imagined through mood, tension, and sound. Burwell's score fits the movie well. It is movie, eerie, and atmospheric, without taking over every scene. I like that the music can pull back into silence during conversations. That makes the awkward moments feel even worse, because suddenly there is nothing between you and what the characters are saying. The sound design and score do a lot of heavy lifting. This is not a movie that depends solely on what you see. A lot of the discomfort comes from what you hear. The sound design is sharp and unsettling. It helps build the space around the characters. Even when something is happening off camera, some sounds feel too close, too wet, or too real. And when Nikki's performance shifts, the audio makes it hit harder. The screams, the shrieks, and even the quieter sounds all add to the tension. That works because Curry Barker does not cut everything to death. He lets shots sit. He gives scenes time to breathe. So the sound has room to build, dread without forcing it. Now, that gives Obsession a specific kind of pressure. It is not only trying to scare you with the gore or shock, it's trying to trap you inside Bear's bad decision and Nikki's loss of control. The writing gives the film its moral problem. The directing gives it control. The editing gives it speed and precision. And the music gives it that nervous, emotional pull underneath everything. While Obsession is director Curry Barker's first film with a real budget, compared to the previous DIY YouTube projects, which cost as little as $800, it was still a relatively modest production, made for under $1 million. Despite the low budget for theatrical release, Barker was surprised by what they were able to pull off and by how cinematic it looks. When the film had its premiere in the Midnight Madness section of the Toronto International Film Festival, TIFF, it quickly became a breakout hit. This highly enthusiastic reception sparked a massive bidding war among studios. Within 24 hours of its Midnight Madness premiere, the film was acquired by Focus Features. The acquisition was a massive success for the first-time theatrical director, with Focus Features securing the film in a deal reportedly worth more than $15 million. Blumhouse is also noted as having funding attached and helping to produce the film. One reason there is so much hype around Obsession is that Curry Barker already has more projects lined up behind it. And again, these are future projects, so anything can change. Cast change, script change, release plans change. But right now, Barker's name is attached to some pretty interesting horror work. The big one is Anything But Ghost. That one has Aaron Paul attached, along with Cooper Tomlinson, Curry Barker, Bryce Dallas Howard, and Violet McGraw. Barker is directing and co-writing with Tomlinson, and Taylor Clemons is also listed as the cinematographer, which is important because Clemons shot Obsession too. This visual partnership should continue into the next movie. The setup sounds very Barker. It is about fake paranormal investigators who scam people with stage ghost cleanings, then run into something real. That already feels like his lane. Horror, comedy, awkward people making bad choices. And then the joke turns into actual danger. Then there's the bigger headline. Barker has also been linked with A24's new Texas Chainsaw Massacre project. Deadline and Variety both report that he is set to reimagine the 1974 original. Now, this is a huge jump. Going from Obsession to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is not a small step. That is one of the biggest names in horror, and honestly, after seeing how nasty and uncomfortable Obsession can get, I understand why some people would look at Barker for that world. He seems interested in horror that feels awkward, personal, ugly, a little funny in the worst possible way. That could fit Texas Chainsaw if he keeps it grounded and does not turn it into glossy franchise noise. There is also talk of more Blumhouse work around him, which makes sense. Obsession already has Jason Blum attached as an executive producer, and anything but ghosts is set up through Blumhouse and Spooky Pictures. So right now, Barker looks like one of those horror filmmakers to watch. Obsession is not just a one-off. It may be the movie that opens the door to a much bigger run. Of course, the biggest fear for any new director is that their sophomore project sinks or hinders their career. I'm thinking of Orson Welles, Michael Cimino, Dennis Hopper, Josh Trank, Kevin Costner, and Richard Kelly. And for those who know their film history, there is the ultimate example in Charles Laughton. Let's talk about the phenomenal cast of Obsession. A relatively small group of actors giving their all. This is not a horror film built around a huge ensemble or a long list of side characters. It is built around a tight emotional triangle with Bear and Nikki at the center, and the people around them reacting to the damage caused by one bad wish. Michael Johnston plays Bear, or Baron, that's his real name, the awkward romantic at the center of the story. Bear works because he cannot be played only as creepy from the start. If he is too obviously dangerous, the movie loses tension. Johnston has to make him feel lonely and insecure and easy to understand while still letting us see the selfishness beneath the wish. This is the uncomfortable part of the performance. Bear is not a monster from a distance. He is closer to a person who makes one terrible decision and then keeps trying to live with the consequences. While Inde Navarrette gets wide applause for her work, Johnston's Bear is just as important, or maybe a bit more, because in actuality, Bear is the villain. And what makes the protagonist stand out even more is a great villain, and Michael Johnston is that villain. Inde Navarrette plays Nikki, and her role is the trickier half of the movie. She has to be believable before the wish, then shift into something more intense without turning the character into a joke. That kind of performance can go wrong fast. Too small and the horror does not land, too big and it becomes camp. The early reaction to the film keeps pointing to Navarrete as one of the major reasons why the movie works. Because she does. The Daily Beast singled out her shift from sweet to sinister, and Metacritic's review blurbs about also highlight strong turns by Johnston and Navarrete as a major part of the film's impact. Cooper Tomlinson plays Ian, and Megan Lawless plays Sarah. From a cast structure perspective, they matter because they widen the story beyond Bear's private fantasy. Horror like this needs outside pressure. It needs people who make the lead character's choice harder to hide. Ian and Sarah help turn the wish from a private mistake into a social problem. They give the movie more movement, and they keep the story from becoming just a two-person breakdown. Andy Richter shows up in an Obsession in a smaller role, but it is one of those fun surprises that gives the movie some extra personality. He plays the role of the manager of the music store. He is Sarah's dad, who also works with Bear, Nikki, and Ian. He also has that familiar Andy Richter presence, where you just see him pop up makes the scene feel a little stranger and funnier. His character is not a major plot driver. He is not there to solve anything or push the curse forward. He just adds texture to the Friends group everyday world before everything falls apart. The music store feels like a real place because of small roles like his. And for me, that is why the cameo works. It's quick and it's funny, but it doesn't feel like the movie stops to say, hey, look who this is. What stands out overall is the cast is not being used as decoration. Johnston has to carry the moral discomfort. Navarrete has to carry the emotional and physical escalation. Tomlinson and Lawless helped show the damage spreading outward. Richter adds some comic tension without breaking the horror tone. That is the kind of cast design that works well for a low-budget horror film. Keeps the focus tight, but it keeps the story enough human texture to feel bigger than its budget. Watching Obsession took me back to my dating days and to a woman I thought I was obsessed with. And maybe she was obsessed with me. A lot of what I saw in Nikki I have seen in real life. No magic willow twig evolved, of course, but that feeling was there, that strange, intense, unsettling attachment. It was uncanny and disturbing. Inde Navarrette's Nikki is forceful, physical, and completely unpredictable. There are moments where she channels the same kind of emotional chaos Toni Collette brought to Annie in Hereditary, and that connection makes sense because Navarrette has mentioned watching Hereditary while she and the crew were preparing for the film. She also drew up from Mia Goth's work looking at how a character can be extremely heightened while still feeling human and grounded. I believe this is her first horror film, and she absolutely dives into the genre. There are shades of Glenn Close, Toni Collette, and even a little Linda Blair in the way she moves between obsession, pain, rage, and helplessness. Watching her jump from one extreme to another is phenomenal. High marks for her. This is the kind of performance that should get her more attention. I also want to give Michael Johnston credit. At first, Bear comes across as lovesick. He is pining for his crush, nervous, awkward, and almost painfully sincere. But as the movie goes on, he starts to curdle. He becomes pathetic, fearful, and unable to stand up for himself. Then he shifts into something worse, a stubborn asshole who only wants the one thing he cannot have. And like a lot of men, he does not realize that there is someone right under his nose who actually cares about him. Johnston plays Bear as morally complicated. He is not a cartoon villain. He is weak, selfish, and desperate, which honestly makes him more uncomfortable to watch. Both Johnston and Navarrete are top-notch here, and I hope this opens up more doors for both of them. Damien McCarthy, who directed Hokum, said something along the lines that good horror starts with a simple story and complex characters. I think Curry Barker understands that. Obsession is simple on the surface. Make a wish and deal with the consequences. But the characters keep making morally gray choices. Some of those choices almost feel understandable in the moment. And that is where the movie gets under your skin. Barker did an excellent job writing what is basically a dark comedy wrapped inside a disturbing horror film. As a director, he gets the performances he needs from the cast, and those performances drive the story forward. You stay invested because the characters keep making bad choices that still feel human. His editing and pacing worked for me too. The movie knows when to move fast, but it also knows when to stop and let the camera linger. Sometimes it lingers on something disturbing. Sometimes it just stays on Nikki long enough to make you uncomfortable. What I also liked is how Barker uses levity, then rips it away. A scene can feel funny or awkward for a second, and then one change in the music cuts the feeling off completely. Suddenly you're back in the horror. That balance is one of the reasons the movie works so well. The lighting and music really stood out to me. Taylor Clemons shoots the film in a 150 by 1 or 3.2 frame ratio, and that gives the movie an unfamiliar feel. There's that lot of headroom which makes Bear feel small, lonely, and boxed in. And when Nikki is trapped inside the curse, she is often filmed in shadow. In some scenes, she's almost completely swallowed by the darkness, and that makes her feel less like herself and more like something wearing her, almost like her soul is being veiled. Rock Burwell's score is also a strong fit for the film. He does, on an intimate scale, what Joseph Bishara does on a bigger horror films. It's eerie, creepy, and disturbing without overpowering the movie. I noticed that the movie moves with her, with Nikki, when she crosses a room or starts shifting into that obsessive version of herself. The score helps you feel the change before the scene fully says it. Overall, I think the cast and crew were excellent. The violence is nasty, but it does not feel pointless. It has impact, it has consequence, and it fits the story Barker is telling. Critically, Obsession is coming in strong. Rotten Tomatoes has it at 95% based on 135 reviews, with the verified audience score also at 95%. Metacritic is at 81 from 24 reviews with 23 positive, 1 mixed, and 0 negative. So the response is not just good, It is unusually strong for a movie this nasty, weird, and uncomfortable. I enjoyed Obsession immensely. Is it a 5 out of 5? No. For me, Lee Cronin's The Mummy still holds that top spot this year. But Obsession absolutely deserves your time and your money, and if you're part of the Gen Z audience, this one might hit even harder. It feels built around modern loneliness, romantic fantasy, and the ugly side of wanting someone to complete you. If you've seen it, drop a comment below and let me know. Did it mess you up, or was it just a fun ride? And if you're into sci-fi, horror, action, adventure, prop culture, or all things geek, hit that like button and subscribe for more reviews like this. Don't forget to check out the Intelligent Filmgoers apparel, link in the description. And in a film like this, Run P is the professional moviegoer's greatest ally in making sure you don't miss the scary parts. And until next time, keep it weird, keep it fun, and for the love of all things holy, be careful what you wish for.